Hello everyone and welcome back to Doctor Who Month. This week I'm reviewing Scream of the SHALKA, which is technically the 40th anniversary special. SHALKA is weird because it's one of very few pieces of Doctor Who that was intended to be canon when it was made, but is specifically not canon now. Not that stopped fan theories from circulating trying to fit it into canon. Scream of the SHALKA was an animated webcast released in 2003 on BBC I, the BBC's website at the time. They had experimented in the past with various webcasts, including Doctor Who ones. These previous ones, including Death Comes to Time in 2001, Real Time in 2002, and Shada previously in 2003, were all less animated stories and more audio stories with illustrations. James Goss, the producer of these webcasts, then pitched a fully animated story. Scream of the SHALKA was supposed to be an official continuation of Doctor Who, introducing a new Doctor and companion. However, shortly before the serial premiere, the Russell T Davies revival was announced, making the canonicity of SHALKA questionable before it even came out. Sequels were canned and continuity was ignored when the new series came out and made this ninth Doctor no longer canon. This serial was written by Paul Cornell, who had previously written plenty of Doctor Who for Virgin, Big Finish, and Doctor Who magazine, as well as plenty of non-Who projects. He would go on to write for the new series. If I had to describe the story of this serial, I'd describe it as it's a fine story with some good sci-fi ideas, good pacing, and alright characters. And I don't think the story is really what's fascinating about this serial. It's everything that frames the story. The animation, the Doctor, the side characters, the cast, and the context that the story is supposed to exist in. The story was kinda supposed to be a run-of-the-mill Doctor Who story. It was probably a deliberate decision to not be incredibly ambitious for a few reasons. First off, while animation has its budgetary benefits over live action, it's not immune to budgetary concerns, so anything super ambitious would be difficult on a budget for a webcast. Remember, internet was slow. The animation couldn't be too complex. Second, it was supposed to introduce the characters and to set the tone of the series, and juggling that with a groundbreaking story would have been difficult. So let's talk about those things that I said are fascinating. Firstly, the animation. The animation is weird. Sometimes it looks fine, but other times it looks like early 3D animation. But it's 2D, if you know what I mean. Remember, this was animation to be hosted on a website in 2003, so because of that and a very low budget, the animation is very limited, and the video isn't very high definition. It's kinda like watching a 1960s Hanna-Barbera cartoon. I'm fine with it for the most part, but sometimes it does get a little bothersome. Sometimes you can tell that because of time and money, a lot of the backgrounds are very basic. For example, the TARDIS set is a console, a staircase, and some bits of furniture in front of a largely black background. Also, there are these weird lines all around the image. I don't know if that's from taking an image that's meant to be played on a 2003 computer monitor and playing it on a TV though, so I'm not gonna grill it too hard on that. The Doctor. This is the only appearance of Richard E. Grant as the Doctor. Well, kind of. We'll get back to that in a second. His Doctor is kind of interesting. Looking at it now, I'm pretty much fine with it. Like, if this version of the Doctor was on the actual show, it would probably be fine, but that's mainly because of the variation we've had in the Doctor since. Stacked against the classic Doctors, it's a pretty drastic difference. The only thing coming close, really, is the Paul McGann version. He's dark but compassionate, similar to Christopher Eccleston, but also very high class and homesy. Do I think it's the best version of the character? No. He's very sarcastic in a cynical way that can make him come off as kind of mean-spirited, but he definitely has his very doctorly moments. I don't think he's as bad as a lot of people claim he is, but I wouldn't have been very crazy about him being an official Doctor. The side characters are interesting too, and really reveal a lot about both the parallels and differences between this version of reintroducing the show and Series 1. They're similar in that both see the Doctor meeting a young modern woman in a town being invaded by aliens, trying to take over the world. She is lifted out of her everyday life, and at the end she decides to travel with the Doctor instead of staying on Earth with her average everyday boyfriend. They both feature a Doctor who's regenerated since we last saw them, and we didn't see that regeneration. But they're different in how they treat themselves in respect to the original series. In the Davies version, while he doesn't want to alienate the viewers with references and baggage related to the classic series, he wasn't afraid of using the show's history to tell a good story, believing they just had to introduce this new audience to the show. SHALKA, on the other hand, had a full-on embargo on bringing back stuff from the classic series. James Goss asked Paul Cornell to not include references and appearances of things from the past for the same reason, to not alienate new viewers. But there lies two problems. One is that, unlike the Davies version, which was being broadcast on national television where anyone could watch, Scream of the Shalka was something you found by searching for online. The people who watched it were almost exclusively Doctor Who fans, so there was no one to alienate. The second is that you're throwing basic continuity out of a 40th anniversary special. This story featured the Doctor teaming up with the military. Why not make that unit? How would that alienate audiences? Also, the Master's in this as a robot that contains the Master's consciousness that the Doctor saved and inhabits the TARDIS as somewhat of a companion. Paul Cornell came up with a backstory explaining how this happened, but because they didn't want to alienate viewers, this wasn't put in. It's referenced, but only vaguely enough that viewers probably thought that the Master's consciousness just survived the Eye of Harmony from the TV movie, and the Doctor put it in a machine, despite Cornell having a completely different idea. This leads me to the cast, which is pretty crazy in perspective of Doctor Who as a show. Richard E. Grant had previously played the 10th Doctor in the 1999 comedy sketch Curse of the Fatal Death, and would later play Walter Simeon, a puppet of the Great Intelligence, in Series 7 of the Revive show. Sophie Okonedo, who plays the Doctor's companion Allison, would later play Liz 10 in Series 5 of the Revive series. The Master is voiced by Derek Jacobi, who would play the Master in Series 3 of the Revive series, and also in a lot of Big Finish stories. David Tennant even cameos in this.
We're locked up for the weekend! Go away! There's nothing here!
Very star-studded for something that's no longer canon, and is kind of orphaned in its own continuity. Because of the new series, this is no longer canon, and the new stories were cancelled. All that was made was Scream of the Shalka and a short story called The Feast of the Stone. Originally, the first series with this Doctor would have been a trilogy though. A considerable amount of work was even put into a second serial called Blood of the Robots that ended up being cancelled, and there were various pitches for a second serial that were turned down that could have ended up rewritten as a third serial. Plus, there's that unrealized backstory I was talking about before. So there's actually a lot more to this universe than a lot of people think, and that's what next week's discussion will be about. In the meantime, enjoy some of my other videos. I'll be back next week reviewing Dimensions in Time, and until then, don't forget to subscribe for daily videos on the franchises you love, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.